family didn't invite me on their trip and wanted me to sit their pets. They never saw this coming. Imagine finding out your entire family planned a luxury vacation without you. No invite, no explanation, just the expectation that you'd stay behind and watch their dog. Well, that's exactly what happened to me. But here's the twist. I didn't just sit back and take it. I flipped the script, booked my own trip, and left them scrambling. You won't believe how they reacted. Stay with me, because this story, it's about more than just a vacation. It's about reclaiming my worth. Trust me, the fallout was absolutely insane. Of all the ways I thought my day would go, I never expected to be standing in my kitchen, gripping my phone so tightly that my fingers ached, while my mother casually informed me that my entire family was going on vacation without me. The words hit like a punch to the gut, but she delivered them with the same light, airy tone she used when reminding me to pick up milk at the store. "Oh, honey, I thought Alex told you. We're all going to the Maldives next month. Your father, me, Alex, and Brittany. It'll be wonderful. White sand beaches, clear blue water, just what we need." My stomach twisted so hard it felt like it was turning inside out. Alex, my younger brother, had always been the golden child, and Brittany, his fiancée, had seamlessly slid into our family like she had been born into it. Meanwhile, I was just there, the dependable one, the responsible one, the one who was never quite important enough to be included when it mattered. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Wow, that sounds nice." I knew better than to expect an invitation at this point, but some part of me still held onto a pathetic shred of hope. Maybe she would realize the glaring omission in her announcement. Maybe she would say, "Of course you're coming too." But instead, she barreled ahead, oblivious. "Anyway," she continued, her voice taking on that sickly sweet lilt that always preceded a request. "We need a favor. You know how Rex gets when we board him? He won't eat for days. And with his arthritis acting up, the vet said he needs extra care. So, since you're not really doing anything that week, could you stay at the house and watch him?" My ears rang. Not really doing anything? I ran a successful interior design business. I had an apartment in the city that I paid for on my own. I had a life. And yet, to them, I was just the convenient option, the one who could be counted on to step in when needed. I could hear the barely restrained expectation in her voice, the assumption that I would, as always, say yes, because that's what I did. I took care of things. I filled in the gaps. I was the glue that held things together when no one else wanted to be bothered. A familiar weight pressed down on my chest, that suffocating sense of being unseen, unheard. But this time, something felt different. I wasn't just hurt. I was angry. I forced a short, bitter laugh. "So let me get this straight. You planned an entire family vacation without me, but you expect me to drop everything to watch your dog?" A beat of silence. Then my mother let out a soft chuckle like I was being ridiculous. "Oh, sweetheart, don't be like that. We just thought, well, you're always so busy with work and, you never really take vacations." I almost dropped the phone. The absurdity of it all made me lightheaded. I never took vacations because they never invited me, because I had learned early on that no one was going to make space for me. If I wanted something, I had to carve it out myself. I closed my eyes, inhaling sharply through my nose. "I'll think about it," I said, my voice unreadable. My mother took that as an agreement. Oh, wonderful. It would mean so much to us. And to Rex, of course. I ended the call without another word, setting my phone down on the counter. My hands were trembling. I stood there for a long time, staring at the subway tile backsplash I had picked out when I renovated my kitchen last year. Slowly, I turned, walked to my laptop, and pulled up my bookmarked travel site, Santorini. I had dreamed of going to Greece since college when I spent hours poring over photographs of the whitewashed buildings and deep blue waters in my design courses. I had always told myself I would go one day, but there was always work. always obligations. Always family needing something from me. My mouse hovered over the Book Now button. My phone buzzed again. A message from Alex. Mom said you were being weird about watching Rex. Come on, Em. Don't be difficult. It's not like you have any real plans. Plus, what would you even do with time off? You never go anywhere. A sharp, humorless laugh escaped my lips. Any real plans? Like my life had no value outside of what I could do for them. Like I didn't matter unless I was making their lives easier. My fingers moved before I could second-guess myself. Click. The confirmation screen popped up. Congratulations. You're going to Greece. I exhaled slowly, my pulse racing. I was doing it. The next morning, my phone was flooded with messages. My mother, alternating between guilt trips and passive-aggressive disappointment. Alex, sending increasingly exasperated texts. Even Brittany chimed in, trying to smooth things over with a sugary sweet, "I'm sure it was just a misunderstanding, Em. Can't you just help out?" By the time family dinner rolled around, I was ready. I walked into my parents' house, the air thick with the scent of roasted chicken and barely concealed tension. They were all seated around the dining table, deep in discussion about flights and resort amenities. My mother barely glanced up as she waved me over. "Oh, honey, good, you're here. So, about Rex, I won't be able to watch him," I said simply, sliding into my chair. The table fell silent. My mother blinked. "What?" "I made other plans," I said, sipping my water. "You'll have to figure something else out." Her fork clattered against her plate. "What could possibly be more important than helping your family?" I set my glass down, locked eyes with her, and smiled. "My trip to Greece." Alex scoffed. "You're not going to Greece." Without a word, I pulled up my phone, turned the screen toward them, and showed them my confirmed itinerary. Their faces were priceless. "You can't just," my mother sputtered. "I can," I interrupted. "And I am. But the kennel is full." "That sounds like your problem." Alex leaned back, arms crossed. "This is really selfish, Em." I exhaled, looking around at the people who had spent years taking me for granted. "No, Alex," I said, standing up, my voice steady for the first time in years. "This is me finally choosing myself." And with that, I walked out. The moment I walked out of my parents' house, my heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. My breath came fast, my hands still trembling from the confrontation. But as I stepped into my car, gripping the steering wheel, a strange sensation settled over me, relief. A weight I had carried for years suddenly felt lighter. For the first time in my life, I had said no. I had put myself first, and I wasn't backing down. As I pulled out of their driveway, I half expected one of them to come running after me, to call my name, to demand that I come back inside and explain myself. But no one did. The house remained still, its warmly lit windows hiding the storm of emotions I had undoubtedly left behind. I knew this wasn't over. My family didn't handle rejection well, especially not from me. They had always relied on me to be the accommodating one, the easy one, the one who never rocked the boat. But this time, I had tipped the damn thing over, and I had no doubt they were already plotting how to drag me back into their carefully controlled version of reality. I barely made it home before my phone started buzzing. Mom. I let it ring. Then Alex. I ignored it. A minute later, a text. "What the hell, Em? You're really doing this?" Yes. Yes, I was. I tossed my phone onto the couch and exhaled sharply, pressing my hands to my temples. The adrenaline from earlier was starting to wear off, and in its place came exhaustion. I had spent so many years biting my tongue, swallowing my feelings, playing the part they expected. And now, suddenly, I had flipped the script. No wonder they were scrambling. I needed a drink. I poured myself a generous glass of wine and sank into the couch, staring at my laptop. The confirmation email for my trip to Greece was still open on the screen, the bold black letters declaring my one-way ticket to Santorini. One way. I had booked it without even thinking, but now, staring at the word, something inside me twisted. Was I really doing this? Was I really going to pack up and leave? A flicker of doubt crept in. Maybe I should have handled things differently. Maybe I should have tried to talk it out instead of dropping a bomb on them at dinner. No. I shut my laptop with a sharp click. They didn't deserve an explanation. They had made it perfectly clear where I stood in their lives. An afterthought. A convenience. Someone they only noticed when they needed something. They hadn't invited me on their trip, not because they thought I was busy, but because they hadn't even considered me in the first place. I wasn't their daughter, I was their backup plan. Not anymore. I drained my wine, set the glass down, and grabbed my phone. Jenna, my best friend, picked up on the second ring. Well, she drawled. To what do I owe the pleasure? I exhaled sharply, leaning back against the couch. I just blew up my entire family dynamic. Jenna let out a low whistle. Finally, I laughed, but there was no real humor in it. They're freaking out. Mom's calling, Alex is texting, and I'm pretty sure my dad is sitting in his study pretending none of this is happening. Good, Jenna said simply. I frowned. Good? Yes, good. You've spent your whole life bending over backward for them. Maybe it's time they freak out a little. Maybe it's time they realize they can't treat you like a doormat. I swallowed hard. I don't know. Maybe I was too harsh, Jenna snorted. Too harsh? Let me get this straight. Your entire family planned a luxury vacation without you and expected you to stay behind and babysit their dog. And you think you were too harsh? I sighed. When you put it like that, there's no other way to put it, babe, Jenna said. You did the right thing. I closed my eyes, letting her words sink in. Maybe she was right. Maybe, for once, I had actually done what was best for me. I'm going to Greece, I murmured, more to myself than to her. Jenna let out a delighted squeal. Hell yes, you are! When do you leave? 2 weeks. Perfect. That's just enough time for me to throw you a screw, my family. I'm choosing myself party. I laughed, shaking my head. You're ridiculous. And you love me for it, she said smugly. Now, tell me everything. I want all the details. So I did. I told her about the confrontation, about the way my mother's face had gone slack with shock, about the way Alex had scoffed like I was being irrational. By the time I finished, I felt lighter. Jenna, as expected, was practically vibrating with excitement. Okay, so what's next? I hesitated. What was next? For so long, I had operated on autopilot. I had done what was expected, played the part assigned to me. Now, for the first time, I was stepping off the script, and that was terrifying. I need to start packing, I said finally. Jenna clapped her hands. And shopping. Greece deserves a whole new wardrobe. I smiled. You're coming with me, aren't you? To the mall? Obviously. I exhaled, shaking my head. I mean it, Jen. Thanks for always being in my corner. Jenna's voice softened. Always, babe. We hung up, and I sat there for a long moment, staring out the window at the city skyline. This was real. I was doing this. For the first time in my life, I was choosing myself. And no matter what my family did next, I wasn't going to let them take this away from me. At this point, you might be thinking, maybe they just forgot to invite her? Maybe it was a misunderstanding? Oh no. Trust me, this was no accident. They knew what they were doing. And now, they're furious that I dared to say no. But here's the real question. Do you think they'll finally apologize? Or will they double down and try to manipulate me into giving in? Drop a 1 in the comments if you think they'll make things right. Or drop a 2 if you think they're about to make this even worse. Keep watching, because what happens next? Nobody saw it coming. The next morning, I woke up to a barrage of missed calls and text messages. My phone was practically overheating from the sheer number of notifications. Mom had left multiple voicemails, each one dripping with an escalating mix of guilt and frustration. Alex had texted me again, his messages shifting from irritation to disbelief to outright anger. Even Brittany, my brother's fiancée, had sent a carefully worded text about how family should stick together and how she hoped I would reconsider. I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the phone. A part of me, the old me, felt the familiar tug of obligation, the instinct to smooth things over, to make them comfortable. But then I remembered. They hadn't cared about my comfort when they planned that trip. They hadn't even considered my feelings. I took a deep breath, locked my phone, and tossed it onto the kitchen counter. Not today. I had things to do. The suitcase was already half-packed, lying open on my bed. A mix of sundresses, swimsuits, and travel essentials scattered around it. Just seeing it there, ready to be zipped up, made it feel real. I was leaving. But first, I had to survive the next 2 weeks. By noon, I was at work, trying my best to focus on my latest interior design project when my office door swung open without warning. Jenna, my best friend and coworker, stepped inside, a knowing smirk on her face. She plopped down into the chair across from me and crossed her arms. "So, when were you planning on telling me that your family has officially lost their damn minds?" I sighed, rubbing my temples. I was going to mention it after I had at least 1 cup of coffee. She laughed, shaking her head. "Girl, I checked Facebook this morning. Your mom is on a mission. She's practically writing a Greek tragedy about how you've abandoned the family." I groaned. Oh God. What did she post? Jenna pulled out her phone and read dramatically. "Sometimes, no matter how much you love someone, they choose to walk away. Family should mean something. But sadly, in today's world, some people only think about themselves." I clenched my jaw. That woman had an art for making herself the victim. "And the comments are wild," Jenna continued. "Aunt Linda is all, you raised such a strong, independent daughter." Meanwhile, cousin Sarah is like, "Wow, she really just ditched you guys? That's cold." I exhaled sharply. "Of course Sarah's taking their side," obviously Jenna said. "She's been drinking the family Kool-Aid since birth." I rolled my eyes, pushing my laptop aside. I should have seen this coming. I knew they'd guilt-trip me, but this is next-level manipulation. Jenna leaned forward. "So what's the plan? You gonna respond? Call them out?" I shook my head. "No. That's exactly what they want. They want me to get sucked into the drama, to defend myself, to justify my decision. But I don't owe them that." Jenna grinned. "Damn, look at you, standing your ground." "It only took 3 decades, I muttered. Jenna laughed. "Well, better late than never." I smiled, but deep down, I felt a familiar, nagging weight in my chest. No matter how right I knew I was, no matter how much I told myself I was doing the right thing, it still hurt. They weren't just upset. I had shattered their entire perception of me. I wasn't the compliant daughter anymore. I wasn't the dependable backup plan. I had thrown the script out the window, and they had no idea how to handle it. And honestly, neither did I. That evening, as I curled up on my couch with a glass of wine, my phone buzzed again. Another text from Alex. "At least call Mom back. You know how she gets when she's upset." I stared at the message, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. A few days ago, I would have caved. I would have called her, let her cry, let her guilt me into backing down. Not this time. Instead, I typed back, "She should have thought about that before she treated me like an afterthought." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Less than a minute later, my phone rang. Alex. I debated ignoring it, but a part of me wanted to know what his angle was. I picked up. "What do you want?" "Wow," Alex scoffed. "Hostile much?" I rolled my eyes. "You've been texting me all day, Alex." "Just say what you want to say," he sighed, and for a second, I thought maybe, just maybe, he was calling to apologize. But no, of course not. "Mom's a wreck," he started. "She's been crying all day, calling me nonstop. Dad's pissed. Brittany doesn't even know what to say anymore." I let out a humorless laugh. "Wow. So now I'm responsible for everyone's emotions? That's new." Alex groaned. "You know that's not what I mean." Then what do you mean? I shot back. He hesitated. I don't get why you're making this such a big deal. We didn't invite you because we assumed you wouldn't want to come. That's all. No conspiracy. No secret vendetta. We just didn't think it was a big deal. I clenched my jaw. We just didn't think it was a big deal. That right there was the entire problem. They hadn't meant to exclude me. They just hadn't thought about me at all. I closed my eyes, exhaling sharply. Alex, do you even hear yourself? He sighed. Look, I'm just saying, no, you're not just saying anything. I cut in. You're doing what you've always done, minimizing. Acting like I'm overreacting instead of actually acknowledging the fact that you all completely erased me from a family trip. And then, on top of that, you assumed I'd be available to watch your dog? Silence. Do you really not see the problem here? I pressed. Alex let out a slow breath. I don't know what you want me to say. I shook my head. Nothing, Alex. I don't want you to say anything. I want you to actually see me. Another silence. Then, a quiet, I guess I never really thought about it like that. I swallowed hard. Yeah, I know, Alex exhaled sharply. Look, do whatever you want, okay? But just know that when you come back from Greece, things aren't going to be the same. I let out a bitter laugh. Good, that's the whole point. I ended the call before he could say another word. As I set my phone down, my hands were shaking, but not from fear. From relief. Because for the first time, I wasn't the one chasing after them. They were the ones scrambling to keep up. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating against the nightstand. For a second, I considered ignoring it. I already knew who they were. But curiosity or maybe some lingering instinct of responsibility made me reach for it. Mom, 7. Missed calls, Alex, 3. New messages, Dad. 1 voicemail. I stared at the screen, a cold knot settling in my stomach. I could already predict their tactics before even opening the messages. Guilt, blame, passive-aggressive disappointment, and, if history repeated itself, a final push to make me reconsider. I took a deep breath, clicked on Alex's texts first. Alex, Mom's a mess. You happy now? Alex, I don't get why you're being so stubborn about this. It's just a trip. Alex, fine. Whatever. But don't expect us to just pretend this didn't happen when you come back. I clenched my jaw. It's just a trip. The sheer audacity of that sentence sent a wave of anger rippling through me. It wasn't just a trip. It was proof of everything I had been feeling for years. Proof that, no matter how much I did, no matter how much I was there for them, they never thought of me as someone worth including. I didn't bother responding. Instead, I played the voicemail from Dad. Hey, kid. His voice was quiet, measured, like he was trying to sound reasonable. Look, I know you're upset, and maybe your mother could have handled things better. But at the end of the day, family is family, you know that. So, maybe, just think about what you're doing here. A pause, a sigh. You know, your mom's health isn't great. This kind of stress isn't good for her. Just call her back, okay? And there it was. The guilt card. I let out a slow, controlled breath. I had spent years bending over backward to avoid disappointing them, to keep the peace, to make sure they were comfortable, even if it meant sacrificing my own needs. But now they were the ones uncomfortable, and that was what they couldn't stand. I didn't call back. Instead, I got dressed, grabbed my bag, and headed straight to work. By the time I walked into my office, Jenna was already there, waiting for me with an iced coffee and an expression that said, "Spill it, now." "Okay," she said, the second I set my bag down. "So, what's the latest in the Emily versus the family saga?" I rolled my eyes, taking a sip of coffee. Mom's losing her mind. Alex is pissed. Dad's doing that thing where he pretends to be the rational one, while subtly guilt-tripping me into submission. Jenna raised an eyebrow. "So, business as usual. Pretty much," she smirked. "Are they still trying to get you to cancel your trip?" I let out a short laugh. "Not just cancel. They actually tried to replace it. Her eyes widened. What? Oh yeah. My dad called last night and get this offered to pay for me to go to the Maldives instead. Said they wanted to make things right. Jenna's jaw dropped. Shut the hell up, I snorted. I wish I was joking. She leaned forward, eyes glittering with amusement. So, let me guess. They don't actually care about making things right. They just don't want you to have the audacity to take a trip on your own terms. Exactly. She shook her head, letting out a low whistle. Damn, that's some next-level control freak behavior. I sighed, rubbing my temples. I don't get it. Why does this bother them so much? I mean, I knew they'd be upset, but this is insane. Jenna tilted her head. You ever think it's not about the trip at all? I frowned. What do you mean? She shrugged. Think about it. Your whole life, they've had this unspoken rule. Emily is the responsible one. Emily is the reliable one. Emily doesn't make waves. The second you step out of that role, boom, chaos. I exhaled slowly, her words settling deep in my chest. She wasn't wrong. Jenna studied me for a moment before smirking. So, how does it feel to be a full-blown rebel? I let out a small laugh. Weird. She raised an eyebrow. Weird good or weird bad? I thought about it for a second. Weird good. Jenna grinned. Damn right it does. The rest of the day passed in a blur of deadlines and meetings. But the second I got home, reality crashed back in. The moment I stepped inside my apartment, my phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Mom, we need to talk. Now. I stared at it, my pulse quickening. I had been expecting this, dreading it. Before I could talk myself out of it, I hit dial. She picked up on the first ring, Emily. I braced myself. Mom. Silence. Then, a sharp exhale. I don't understand you anymore. I really don't. I bit my lip, choosing my words carefully. I'm not doing this to hurt you. Then, why are you doing it? She demanded. Why are you being so selfish? I clenched my jaw. Because for once I'm choosing me. Her voice cracked. And what about us? What about your family? I swallowed hard. Mom, you chose to exclude me. You made plans without me. And now you want me to feel guilty for making my own? She let out a bitter laugh. You always do this. You always twist things to make yourself the victim. I inhaled sharply. I'm not twisting anything. I'm just finally seeing things clearly. Silence. Then, her voice dropped to a whisper. I just don't know who you are anymore. I closed my eyes. Maybe you never did. A pause. A sharp inhale. And then click. She hung up. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding, my hands shaking. I should have felt guilty. I should have felt something. But instead, all I felt was free. I woke up the next morning to the sound of my phone buzzing again. I barely glanced at the screen before tossing it onto the nightstand. It had been the same cycle for days now. Guilt, blame, passive-aggressive texts from Alex, and increasingly dramatic voicemails from Mom. At this point, I wasn't even surprised. What did surprise me, though, was the knock on my door. A sharp, deliberate knock. Not the kind of knock a neighbor makes when they need to borrow sugar. No, this was different, intentional. I sighed, dragging myself out of bed and toward the door. The second I opened it, my stomach dropped. Sarah, my cousin, stood there, arms crossed, a knowing smirk playing on her lips. Hey, she said, pushing past me before I could even react. I shut the door, already exhausted. Sarah, what the hell are you doing here? She shrugged, making herself comfortable on my couch. Your mom called me. She's worried about you. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Of course she is. Sarah studied me, her expression unreadable. Look, I get it. You're mad. You feel left out. But is this really worth all the drama? I stared at her. Are you seriously asking me that? She sighed, rubbing her temple. Emily, come on. It's just one trip. It's not like they hate you. Maybe they just assumed you wouldn't want to come. I crossed my arms, my patience wearing thin. That's exactly the problem, Sarah. They didn't forget me. They didn't accidentally leave me out. They just didn't think about me at all. She let out a low whistle. Damn. Okay, yeah, that sucks. I raised an eyebrow. That's all you have to say? She shifted uncomfortably. Look, I'm not saying they're right. But, I dunno, maybe you're blowing this out of proportion. My jaw clenched. Blowing it out of proportion? I repeated, my voice dangerously calm. Sarah, do you have any idea what it's like to be treated like an afterthought your entire life? To only matter when it's convenient for everyone else? She hesitated. I mean, I guess not. I exhaled sharply, turning away. Exactly. Sarah was silent for a moment. Then, finally, she spoke, her voice softer this time. Okay. So, what now? You just cut them off completely? I shook my head. No, I just stopped being the person they expect me to be. She studied me, a flicker of something understanding crossing her face. Huh. I narrowed my eyes. What? She smirked. You know, part of me kinda respects this. I blinked. Excuse me? She leaned back, crossing her arms. You've spent your whole life being the good one, the reliable one, the one who never makes waves. But now you're finally standing up for yourself. It's unexpected, I scoffed. Well, glad I could entertain you, she grinned. No, really. I mean, it's a little dramatic, I groaned. Oh my God, Sarah, but, she continued, cutting me off, it's also kinda badass. I paused, caught off guard. She shrugged. I mean, look, I came here expecting to talk you out of this, but honestly, I think you should go. I stared at her. Wait, what? She smirked. Go to Greece, prove them all wrong. Hell, prove yourself wrong. I narrowed my eyes. Why do I feel like there's a catch? She laughed. No catch, just maybe send me a postcard. I shook my head, but for the first time in days, I felt a little lighter. Sarah stood, stretching. All right, well, my job here is done. I'll let Mom know I tried. I rolled my eyes. I'm sure she'll be thrilled. She smirked, heading for the door. But before she left, she turned back, her expression uncharacteristically serious. For what it's worth, I think this is the best thing you've ever done for yourself. I swallowed hard. Thanks, Sarah. She winked. Don't make me regret saying that. And with that, she was gone. I stood there for a moment, staring at the closed door, my thoughts racing. Maybe Sarah was right. Maybe this was the best thing I had ever done. But I had a feeling my family wasn't done with me just yet. I barely had time to process. Sarah's visit before the next wave hit. I had expected the guilt trips, the condescending texts, even the passive-aggressive social media posts. But what I hadn't expected, what genuinely took me by surprise, was the escalation. They weren't just trying to manipulate me anymore. They were trying to trap me. It started with a phone call from my dad, and that alone was unusual. My father rarely called me. He usually let my mother handle the emotional battles while he stayed out of the fray, offering vague words of wisdom when it was convenient. So when his name popped up on my screen, I hesitated. A small, stupid part of me hoped this was the moment he finally saw my side. That he would say something, anything to make me feel like I wasn't crazy for wanting to put myself first. I took a deep breath and answered, Hey, Dad. There was a pause on the other end, then a long sigh. Emily, can we just talk? I swallowed hard, already bracing myself. That depends. Is this actually a talk, or is this another attempt to convince me I'm making a mistake? A beat of silence. Then, just hear me out. I exhaled slowly, pinching the bridge of my nose. Fine. I know things have been tense, he started, his voice careful, like he was stepping around landmines. And I know your mother hasn't handled this the best way. I nearly choked. The best way? That was putting it lightly. But, he continued, I think we can find a compromise. And there it was. The setup. I let out a humorless laugh. A compromise? You mean I drop my plans and do what Mom wants? His tone shifted firmer now. No, Emily. I mean, we're willing to meet you halfway. I clenched my jaw. How? Exactly. There was a small pause. Then, his next words made my stomach turn. Your mother and I talked. We realize now that maybe we should have included you in the first place. That was our mistake, and we'd like to make it right. I blinked, caught off guard. Was this an apology? Hope flickered in my chest, but I knew better than to trust it. So, he continued, we'd like you to come to the Maldives with us. I froze. Excuse me, we'll pay for everything, he pressed on, like he was offering me the deal of a lifetime. Flights, hotel, food, whatever you need. We just want you there, Emily. As a family. And that's when I understood. This wasn't an apology, this was damage control. They didn't suddenly want me there. They didn't care about making things right. They just wanted to keep me in my place, to stop me from going to Greece, from making my own choice. If I accepted, it wouldn't be my trip, it would be theirs. Their itinerary, their expectations, their way of keeping me in line. And worst of all, they thought they could buy me off. I let out a slow breath. Dad, do you hear yourself? What do you mean? He asked, genuinely confused. You're not actually trying to fix this, I said, my voice steady. You're just trying to keep me from going to Greece. That's not true, he insisted. We just realized we were wrong to leave you out, and we're trying to fix it. No, you're trying to fix me, I corrected. You're trying to put me back in my place before I go and do something you don't understand. His voice turned sharp. Emily, it's not like that. We just don't want you to be alone. That almost made me laugh. Alone? I echoed. Dad, I'm choosing to go. I'm not being exiled. I'm not running away. I'm doing something for myself for once, and none of you can stand it. You're reading too much into this, he muttered. No, Dad. I'm finally seeing things for what they are, I shot back. The silence that followed was thick, heavy, final. Then, after a long pause, his voice hardened. So, that's it then? You're really going through with this? I closed my eyes, inhaled deeply, and when I spoke, my voice was unwavering. Yes. Another silence. Then his voice turned cold. Well, I hope you know what you're doing. And with that, he hung up. I stared at my phone, my pulse pounding in my ears. That was it. That was the moment I had been dreading. The moment where the last bit of warmth drained from the conversation. The moment where my father, the quiet one, the rational one, the only one I thought might actually understand, had made it clear. This wasn't just disappointment anymore. This was punishment. My phone buzzed again. A text from Alex. Wow. You really just turned down a free trip to the Maldives? You've officially lost it, Em. I let out a bitter laugh. Of course Alex would see it that way. Then another text, this time from Mom. I just don't understand you anymore. I stared at the message for a long moment before locking my phone and tossing it onto the couch. I didn't need them to understand. I just needed to be free. I barely had time to process my father's cold dismissal before the next wave hit. They had tried guilt. They had tried manipulation. And now? They were showing up at my door. The knock came just as I was finishing my last-minute packing. It was sharp, deliberate, impatient. My stomach twisted. I already knew who it was before I even looked through the peephole. Alex. I sighed, gripping the doorknob tighter than necessary before pulling it open. What are you doing here? My voice was flat, devoid of any warmth. Alex stood there, arms crossed, his jaw clenched so tightly I thought his teeth might crack. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he gave me a once-over, his eyes flicking to my packed suitcase by the door. His lips pressed into a tight line. You're really doing this? He finally asked. I exhaled slowly, already exhausted by the conversation that hadn't even started yet. Yes, Alex. I'm really doing this, he scoffed, stepping inside without an invitation because of course he did. He always just assumed he belonged in my space, my decisions, my life. Jesus, he muttered, pacing a few steps before turning to face me. Mom's a wreck. Dad's pissed. Brittany's trying to stay out of it, but she thinks you're being dramatic. I let out a humorless laugh. Oh, I'm the dramatic one? That's rich coming from the people who tried to bribe me into canceling my trip. His brows furrowed. It wasn't a bribe, it was an olive branch. I crossed my arms, staring him down. No, Alex. It was a last-ditch effort to control me. And when that didn't work, they sent you. His jaw tensed. No one sent me. Right, I said, unimpressed. You just happened to show up the day before my flight, unannounced, after ignoring me for days. He rolled his eyes, running a hand through his hair. I just don't get why you're making such a big deal out of this. So we didn't invite you, big deal. It's not like we did it on purpose. And there it was, the casual dismissal. The same tone they always used whenever I tried to voice my feelings, as if my pain was just an inconvenience to them. I took a slow breath, forcing myself to stay calm. That's exactly the problem, Alex. You didn't do it on purpose. You just didn't think about me at all. He had the audacity to look offended. Oh, come on, Emily. You're acting like we don't care about you. I tilted my head, pretending to consider his words. Huh, that's funny. Because if you did care, maybe someone would have remembered to include me in a trip that took months to plan. Alex groaned, rubbing his face in frustration. God, you're so damn sensitive. That word. Sensitive. Like I was the problem. Like I was overreacting. Something inside me snapped. You really don't get it, do you? I said, my voice shaking not with sadness, but with sheer exhaustion. This isn't just about the trip. This is about the years of being overlooked, of always being the backup plan, of being the one expected to step in and help when it's convenient, but never being important enough to be included. Alex's mouth opened, but I cut him off before he could start another round of excuses. You think this is about the Maldives? It's not. It's about every birthday that got forgotten. Every time Mom and Dad prioritized you over me. Every moment I was made to feel like an afterthought while you got to be the golden child. My voice sharpened. So don't you dare stand there and act like I'm making this up. For the first time, Alex looked unsure. His posture stiffened, his hands curling into fists. He wasn't used to me fighting back. He wasn't used to me standing my ground. He swallowed hard. That's not. He stopped himself, then sighed. Look, I get that you're upset, okay? But do you really have to prove a point like this? Running off to Greece just to spite everyone? I let out a short, bitter laugh. Wow. You really think I booked an international trip just to piss you off? He shrugged. Didn't you? I shook my head, laughing in disbelief. God, Alex, you still don't get it. I didn't tell you I wanted to go because I knew you wouldn't care. Because I knew you'd rather assume I wasn't interested than actually make the effort to ask. Alex didn't respond. I stepped closer, my voice quieter now. And that's the difference between us. When something matters to you, Mom and Dad bend over backward to make sure you have it. But when something matters to me, they don't even notice. A flicker of something crossed his face, something dangerously close to guilt. But it was gone in an instant. Alex shook his head, exhaling sharply. Fine. You're mad. You feel left out. Whatever. But do you really want to throw away your family over this? I stared at him, feeling something in my chest finally crack wide open. You think I'm throwing you away? I asked quietly. No, Alex. You threw me away a long time ago. His jaw tightened, but he had no argument, no defense. I took a step back, nodding toward the door. I think we're done here. He hesitated, looking like he wanted to say something else, but in the end, he just let out a defeated sigh. You're making a mistake. I smiled cold and unwavering. No, Alex. The mistake was thinking I'd always be available. And with that, I opened the door. For a moment, he didn't move. Then, finally, he let out a breath and stepped past me, pausing just before he crossed the threshold. This is gonna backfire, he muttered. You'll see. I met his gaze without flinching. Maybe. But at least this time, it'll be my choice. He gave me one last unreadable look, then walked away. I shut the door behind him, locking it. And for the first time in my entire life, I felt free. I barely had time to let the weight of my conversation with Alex settle before the next blow came. It was almost laughable at this point how predictable they were, how desperate they had become. They had thrown every tactic they could think of at me: guilt, manipulation, passive-aggressive texts, even a last-minute bribe in the form of a free trip. And when none of that worked, when I still refused to fall back into place, they resorted to the one thing I should have seen coming all along. They called my job. I was in the middle of wrapping up my last few assignments before my flight when my boss, Linda, knocked on my office door. She never interrupted me unless it was important. So when I looked up and saw the tightness in her expression, I knew something was wrong. "Got a second?" she asked, stepping inside before I could answer. I set my pen down slowly. "Yeah, what's up?" She shut the door behind her and sighed, folding her arms. "I just got off the phone with your mother." My entire body went rigid. Linda watched me carefully, like she was gauging my reaction. "She told me you were planning an impulsive, irresponsible trip and that she was concerned about how it might affect your performance." A cold wave of anger washed over me. "She what?" Linda shook her head. "Yeah, she was subtle about it, but I could tell she was fishing. She wanted to know if you had really gotten approval for time off, if there were any concerns about your reliability." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Emily, I don't know what's going on, but that was not a call from a concerned mother. That was a call from someone trying to sabotage you." I clenched my jaw so tightly it ached. I could feel the heat rising to my face, the sharp sting of betrayal settling deep into my bones. Of all the things they had done, this was a new low. I exhaled through my nose, forcing myself to stay calm. "Linda, I swear, I had no idea she was going to do that. I put in my vacation request weeks ago. You approved it yourself." Linda held up a hand. "Relax, I know." And I shut her down pretty fast. Told her you were a valuable employee, that you'd already arranged everything, and that yes, I was completely aware of your trip. She paused, shaking her head in disbelief. "Honestly, Emily, I've seen overbearing parents before, but this was something else." I let out a shaky breath, rubbing my temples. She can't stand the fact that I'm finally doing something for myself." Linda leaned against the desk, arms crossed. "And why is that exactly?" I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "Because I've spent my whole life being their liable one. The one who drops everything when they need something. The one who doesn't cause problems." My voice turned bitter. But the second I stop playing along, the second I decide to put myself first, they act like I'm committing some kind of crime. Linda studied me for a long moment before nodding. "Well, if you needed a sign that you're making the right choice, I'd say this is it." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "You're probably right." She straightened, giving me a firm look. "Don't let them get to you, Emily. And don't you dare let them make you second-guess yourself. You deserve this trip. You've earned it. They don't get to take that from you." Something in my chest loosened at her words. I didn't even realize how much I needed to hear that until now. I nodded, forcing a small smile. "Thanks, Linda." She smiled back, but there was something sharp in her expression. "One more thing." I raised an eyebrow. "Yeah?" She hesitated, then sighed. "I don't usually say this about people's families, but Emily, you might want to consider blocking their numbers while you're away." My stomach twisted. "You think they'll keep pushing?" Linda's lips curled into a knowing smirk. "Honey, they haven't even started yet." That thought stayed with me for the rest of the day. By the time I got home that evening, exhaustion had settled deep in my bones, but my mind was still racing. I checked my phone, already dreading what I might find. 22 missed calls, 12 from my mother, 8 from Alex, 2 from my father, and then, of course, the messages. Mom, Emily, I can't believe you would humiliate me like this. Calling your boss? Really? I was just trying to help. Alex, Jesus, do you want to burn every bridge with this family? Dad, call me. Now. I stared at the screen, my pulse pounding. They weren't even sorry. Not one of them had reached out to apologize. No remorse, no acknowledgement of how insane this all was. Just pure, calculated outrage that I had dared to defy them. I took a deep breath, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then, without overthinking it, I did something I should have done years ago. I blocked them, every single one of them. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at my now empty inbox, waiting for the guilt to creep in. But it never came. Instead, all I felt was relief. A quiet, steady kind of peace. For the first time in my life, I wasn't drowning in their expectations, their guilt, their constant, suffocating need to control me. I was free, and I wasn't looking back. I stepped off the plane and inhaled deeply, letting the warm, salty air of Santorini wrap around me like a long overdue embrace. The sky was a brilliant blue, stretching endlessly over the whitewashed buildings that clung to the cliffs, the Aegean Sea shimmering below like a sheet of liquid sapphire. This wasn't just a vacation. This was a statement, a declaration, a turning point. I was here not because I was running away, but because, for the first time in my life, I was running towards something. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of emotions. Cutting off my family, ignoring the endless calls and guilt-ridden messages, standing my ground despite the constant waves of manipulation, it had been exhausting, but necessary. I had spent years being their afterthought, their backup plan, their convenient problem solver. And when I finally said no, they couldn't handle it. They tried to guilt me, then they tried to punish me. And when none of that worked, they tried to break me. But here I was, still standing, still breathing. And now I was finally living. I checked into my villa, a small but elegant place nestled on the edge of a cliff, overlooking the water. The balcony doors were already open, letting in the soft breeze that carried the scent of citrus and sea salt. I set my suitcase down and walked straight to the railing, resting my hands against the warm stone as I looked out over the view. It was breathtaking. I did this. I made this happen. No one else. Not my family, not their expectations, not their manipulations. Me. My phone buzzed on the table behind me. I ignored it. I had promised myself I wouldn't check not yet. Not until I had at least given myself a moment to breathe. Instead, I pulled out my camera, something I hadn't used nearly enough in the past few years. Photography had always been a passion of mine, but like everything else, I had let it fall to the side, buried beneath responsibilities that were never really mine to carry. I snapped a few shots, the endless blue sea, the sun casting golden light over the domed rooftops, the winding cobblestone paths that led through the village, and for the first time in a long time, I felt whole. Later that evening, I found myself sitting at a small outdoor cafe, sipping on a chilled glass of white wine as the sun dipped lower into the horizon. The world felt quiet in a way I wasn't used to. No demands, no expectations, just being. I finally allowed myself to check my phone. Dozens of missed calls, messages, voicemails, all from the same three people. Mom, Emily, we need to talk. This has gone too far. We're family. Alex, you're really just ignoring us now? This is beyond childish. Dad, call me back when you're ready to be reasonable. I stared at the messages, waiting for the familiar pang of guilt to hit. But it didn't. Instead, I felt detached. As if I was reading messages from strangers rather than the people who had shaped my life for nearly 3 decades. Then, just as I was about to put my phone away, another message popped up. Dad, I know you think you're proving a point, but in the end, you'll regret this. We won't be here forever, Emily. Don't let your pride cost you your family. A cold knot twisted in my stomach. There it was, the final weapon. The "you'll regret this when we're gone" card. The one they always played when nothing else worked. I took a slow sip of my wine, staring at the screen. And then, without hesitating, I typed back, "You're right. You won't be here forever. And neither will I." Which is exactly why I'm done wasting my time on people who only see me as an obligation. I hit send and turned off my phone. The next morning, I woke up to something I hadn't felt in years: peace. No lingering anxiety, no pit in my stomach. Just the soft sound of waves crashing below my window and the promise of an entire day that was mine. I spent the afternoon wandering through the town, stopping at a small bakery for a fresh spanakopita, chatting with a local artist who was painting by the docks, taking my time with everything because, for once, there was no rush. I wasn't on anyone else's schedule. I wasn't adjusting my plans to fit someone else's needs. It was liberating. By sunset, I found myself at the highest point of the village, watching the sky explode into shades of pink and gold, casting a warm glow over everything. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't thinking about what came next. I wasn't worrying about what my family was saying behind my back, or whether they had finally accepted that I was done playing their game. None of it mattered anymore. What mattered was this moment, this freedom, this choice. I closed my eyes and inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of my past slip away, piece by piece. I had spent my entire life waiting for permission to take up space, to be seen, to be chosen, but I didn't need their permission. I never had. I had already chosen myself, and I wasn't going back. They tried guilt. They tried manipulation. And now, they're showing up at my door. But here's the real question: how many of us are still stuck in my old life? Trapped in obligations, afraid to put ourselves first? It's time to break free. Drop a in the comments if you've ever had to stand up for yourself. And if this story hit home for you, don't just sit there, like, comment, and share this video with someone who needs to hear this. Because sometimes the best revenge is simply choosing you. In America, we're raised to believe in independence, yet too often we let guilt, obligation, and family expectations hold us back. I learned the hard way you don't owe anyone your time, energy, or dreams just because they expect it. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's survival. If your value in someone's life depends on what you do for them, it's time to walk away. Choose yourself. Chase your dreams. Stop waiting for permission to take up space. You have one life, make it yours. And if that means saying no to others so you can say yes to yourself, do it.